We are, it seems to me, in a situation where one has to ask, not whether infant baptism is legitimate, but whether the church means to do it. That is, to baptize an infant is indeed to bring the infant into the community of Christ. Now, does the church intend to nurture that consciousness in the mind of Christ? Or does it intend simply to go through some kind of magical ceremony and have the consciousness nurtured by the savage superstitions of nationalism and the greed of capitalism? Nothing wrong with infant baptism. Faith is a gift. There's no problem at all. Infants have been baptized since the earliest days in the church. But baptism, like all sacraments, is communal. And it's not merely the baby who is being baptized, it's the community that's taking on an obligation to bring that child up as best it can with the mind of Christ. Where God is love, God is Father, God is Mother, and we are to be incarnations, extensions, instruments of that unconditional love. Is that what it means to do? As it sits down and gives the kid a gun for Christmas? It's a problem. For to what extent is the sentence absolutely correct that the fundamental source of political power and influence is the structuring of reality inculcated from birth? Constituted authority perpetuates itself by shaping the consciousness of those who are born within its sphere. Any one of us understands that on page 2, the meaning of the sentence that, so right at the top or 6, 7 lines down, to attack the prevailing symbol structure of a group is to awaken the threat of chaos. We are nurtured, We are nurtured in what sociologically is called a nomos. The normal. From childhood on forward, whether we're cannibal or Christian, we are told what is normal. By those in authority, by those bigger than us. The very structure of the language of the society tells us what's normal. And it is that normality that we are nurtured in. On top of that, under most circumstances, that normality is backed up by a theodicy, which is that to do the normal is to do God's will. So it is deep. It is deep. When the day comes that the normal fails and the theodicy fails, for whatever reason, if it does, we fall into a world of what's called enemy, chaos. We have no orientation of what is right, what is wrong. We have no sense of truth and meaning. And therefore, make no mistake about it, the issue is not rich or poor. Poor people and rich people are equally conservative, for they do not want to slip out of what for them is the normal. We all know how tenuous our grasp is on reality deep inside us. We all know, to go back to this morning, how much we don't know. And we don't want to lose the little we think we've got. And therefore we try to conserve and conserve and conserve. If what takes place is we slip into this moment here, this enemy. That is meaninglessness. That is no reason to get up in the morning. That is no reason to be alive. Nothing exists anymore. And when we see people, as they get older and older and older, move deeper and deeper into conservatism, it's protection. It's protection. The protection of a given reality, whether it's the tribe or America or whatever it is. And it's protection not only in terms of physical protection of life, it's emotional and spiritual and psychological protection. But to do the normal and to go to church on Sunday, you've just about got it. Now, the question becomes, that it is, the reality becomes, it is impossible, absolutely, positively impossible, to throw out the entire structures of society. It can't be done. It's not reasonable. Not only is it not reasonable, it's just technically impossible. And therefore, some understanding perhaps can be garnered by what Dorothy Day meant by we must build the old, we must build the new in the shell of the old. We must build the new in the shell of the old. You can't, I can't, no human being can tolerate the total destruction of the entire nomos all at once. The entire normal. The issue becomes how to take what is there that is consistent and build around it, build up from it. So that you are not just saying a no, but you are saying a yes. And you are saying a yes and a no in terms of images that people already have. You are simply, to use Nietzsche's term, transvaluing the images. You are not taking them away. You are putting a new value on them. So, in reflecting on this, it becomes a kind of necessary at some point to recognize that the images that we use, that we accept, that we stay with, we use and we accept and we stay with them because in some way, shape, or form, regardless of how irrational, they give us hope. If I accept the Pentagon as a legitimate image of how to conduct reality, it is because it gives me some hope. Hope. Hope is a category that is always future-oriented. Hope is a category of the future. If I accept an image, it is because it appears, from my perspective, to give me some positive future that I otherwise would not have, but I want. Fear, of course, or anxiety, also has its future dimension. The point is not to throw Jesus Christ out the window as an image. The point is not, of course, to take the gospel and say that it's useless. Nor is the point simply to take the gospel and Jesus Christ that have been nurtured in one kind of image of a God of fear and therefore a life and so forth of fear and guilt, and simply put it in other hands. The issue is to build the new within the shell of the old. To transvalue what is there in terms of the images that the people possess. The issue is Jesus Christ's teachings of nonviolent love, are Jesus Christ's teachings of nonviolent love, are Jesus Christ's teachings about fatherhood, motherhood of God, that God is agape? The word is not eros, the word is not philia, the word is God is agape. Otheos agape, estin, God is unconditional abiding love. God is not a monster God, a tyrant God. God is not made in the image and likeness of political dictators of whatever ilk, ecclesial or civil. And so, to what extent are we called to rescue? Are we called to bring people to metanoia by, if you will, rescuing the icon of Christ? Wiping off the icon of Christ. Raising the true icon of Christ. It's simple enough, isn't it? It's simple enough. We call these three things, faith, hope, and love, the three theological virtues. Why? Because it is faith in God as a God of love. It is faith in God as unconditional love that is the only hope. The only hope. It is only by living according to the will of that God, only by living in the presence of that God, only by living out of the energy of that God, that there is any hope. Our faith is in the God who is Father, Mother, and love, and therefore our hope is there. There is a good future. That God ultimately will not do us evil regardless of what. And therefore we can risk loving unconditionally as opposed to loving selectively those who support our survival and not loving those who threaten our survival. Whatever a person loves, is what determines his or her consciousness, the images that they employ. If we love sensual pleasure, the images that will dominate our consciousness are the images of sensual pleasure. To the person who loves food, he or she is filled with images of food, or booze, or we can go on. These images become our way of consciousness. We can love many, many things. We all know that we possess a hierarchy of values, a hierarchy of loves. That is, we possess a hierarchy of activities that we will engage in before we will engage in others. We all have prioritized existences. All kinds of people will give up eating meat if it will give them power. Sign of self-discipline. Well, Who? Hitler. Hitler was a vegetarian. Set aside the pleasure of meat in order to give a certain appearance that gave him power. What do people love? Well, we said they love food. That is, it can be right at the top. Love pleasure, drink, alcohol, wealth. Can be negative, the avoidance of pain. People can love privacy. Everything is set aside for privacy. Nothing gets in the way of them having their space. They can love recognition. Money. Oh, money. Love physical survival. They can love their work. Nothing gets in the way of their work, you know, the workaholic. Can love ease and comfort. Prestige. Can love family. Family. Jesus says that you have to deny mother, father, brother, sister. And how much of the Christian life is putting a hierarchy of values on family? There's no such thing in the gospel. No such thing. Family has its place, and so does the rest of humanity. And so, what we love determines our way of consciousness, the images that we employ. It is terribly important to realize that it is possible to use consistently Christian vocabulary, even a vocabulary of love, to do and to justify things that couldn't possibly be Christian. Murder. We all know that what can look like on the surface a deed of love, what can look like an unquestionable Christian activity, absolutely, positively, without doubt, can be the furthest thing away from the gospel and from Christ's teaching. Right? Going to church on Sunday. What could be more Christian than going to Eucharist on Sunday? Indeed, if one wants to go and pray to God, celebrate with the community, love God, one is there. One goes to church, and that's fine. But suppose one goes to church on Sunday because that's where he or she's going to meet their boyfriend or girlfriend. Suppose one goes to church on Sunday because it's socially acceptable to go and they fear the consequences of not going. Suppose one goes to church on Sunday because their parents will throw them out of the house if they don't go. Suppose one goes to church on Sunday in order to be recognized as a person who goes to church on Sunday because they're running for political office. Suppose one goes to church on Sunday because they fear that if they don't love God, in a crazy sort of use of words, they fear if they don't love God, it will be a mortal sin and they'll go to hell. Suppose one goes to church on Sunday because one is lonely and one likes the coffee and donuts afterwards. Suppose one goes to church on Sunday to foster nationalism. Flag on the altar and we pray. Suppose one goes to church on Sunday to protest communism. I often wondered how many people went to church in Boston when the Pope came to be in the presence of God and how many went to see the Pope. Or I suppose one goes to church on Sunday because it's his job. Same action, being in church on Sunday. In no way does the act in and of itself communicate the value that is loved and cherished from which it moves. It does no good. It does no good to wave fingers at people. Say, do this, do that. It does absolutely no good. Not in Christianity, not in that. Why? You know, it's only a short distance from waving the finger to the clenched fist. Arms. Huh? Arms. Arms are called arms because they're an extension of that. It starts with the fist, and then the knife, and then the sword, and then the gun, and the flamethrower, and the button. But the difference between the closed fist and the open hand of friendship is not in the physical entity. The difference is Jesus didn't come to say, you can use machetes, but you can't use daggers. You know what difference? A machete, a dagger, you get rid of this, you do that. What's going on in here? That's the difference, the only difference. And so, the issue is what is loved in here? What is loved in here? And so, in discerning one's spiritual state, the great issue is, what do I really love? What do I really cherish? For until I be honest with myself about that, there's not much progress that can be made. The truth of the matter is that Jesus says we are supposed to love God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength. Love our neighbor as ourselves. The truth of the matter is Jesus communicates what kind of God God is. God is Father, Mother, God is love. It is that God that we are to love. It is that God that we are supposed to incarnate. It is that God we're supposed to give ourselves whole heart, whole soul, whole mind to. Any love, any other love that's inconsistent with that is idolatrous. The first commandment is the first commandment because it's the first commandment because it's the universal problem. Idolatry. Loving, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, giving one's life and time over to something that is not God. To love what is not God is idolatrous. For the love that is due God, the love that is God, the love that we're called to as Christians, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, not 95%. Jesus could have said 95%. And so, to focus, we know what the relationship is between these three things, huh? We may have even covered in the last workshop, but sometimes covered briefly. Needs, values, and motivations. Our needs, huh? Determine what we value. For what we need is going to determine what we cherish. If I need water to live, I will cherish water. If I need bread to live, I will cherish bread. I will value it. Depending upon how much I need it, I will love it. I will give my time over to it. And so, in the spiritual life, one of the great, great questions is, what do I really need? What do I really need? Simple as that. For we know that we live in a society that is constantly, day in, day out, thousands of times a day, thousands literally, by the use of images, trying to create in us artificial needs, which then will produce artificial values, which then will produce an artificial motivational system. You need to be dressed in a certain way, or you will not be attractive to men and women. You need to own such and such and such and such, or people will not like you. You need to use such and such a toothpaste, or you will not be lovable. Indeed, the world of Madison Avenue understands that people do not want to be lonely and isolated and live meaningful lives, that they do desire to be loved and to be cared for, except what it intentionally does, it creates images that intentionally lie to the person that tells them, use such and such toothpaste or use such and such clothes and you will be loved. You would think after a while people would figure it out. For they use the toothpaste, they are not loved. Of course, money holds a particular spot in this as a need, because money is the medium of exchange for goods and services in the society, and therefore practically any need that's purchasable in the society, if you just get the money, you can have it. The only problem is that perhaps what we really need, beauty, love, holiness, and joy, cannot be purchased. Temptation is always a temptation to idolatry. To love, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, something other than God. To give one's life over to it. Temptation is making something worthy of love that's simply not worthy of love. And so, basically, as we nurture in children needs, we nurture their God. For they will create, with the help of society, a God made in the image of their needs, their values, and their motivations. They will create the God to justify what they're about. And they won't do it alone. Put it another way. When I said all temptation, temptation of making worthy of love that which is not worthy of love, there is another way of saying the same thing that might be clearer. Temptation is to choose to love illusion over reality. To cherish illusion over reality. I in you crave, we desire beauty, love, joy, holiness, meaning. They are not going to be found in Bloomingdale's. It's not there. It is not going to be found in a bottle, or in a pill, in a soap opera. It's not going to be found there. How pitiful and how sad. An entire industry which we nickname Madison Avenue. Human beings spend their lives for a few bucks playing on the deepest kinds of emotions of other people. The desire for joy and hope and so forth. Knowing that what they're giving them can never satisfy that. Knowing they're lying to them. Knowing the images that they're giving them for this won't work, but they'll make a few bucks off them. You see, there are two worlds. And they are different worlds. And they are separated by an abyss at the end. And they have their own rules or their own laws. Their own logic. There is, if you will, the world of love, and there is the world of equivalency. The world of love and the world of equivalency. And each of these worlds has its own logic. There is a logic of love and there is a logic of equivalency. And the logic of love is the logic of generosity. It is the logic of gift. It is not that when I use the term nonviolent love, that Christ came to communicate a doctrine of nonviolent love. It is not that I am putting an adjective in front of love in order to identify one of a number of kinds of love. It is that there is no other kind of love other than nonviolent love. For the instant violence, fear, manipulation, or whatever you want to call it, the instant it is used to procure love, there is no love. Love is either free gift or it doesn't exist. What is done in fear is done in fear. It is not love. Love is either free or it doesn't exist. It's either gift or it doesn't exist. Love is generous. The other side, of course, is, and you listen, you think about it, you listen to Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa says that she is going to give to the poor for nothing what only the rich can afford. Give to the poor for nothing what only the rich can afford. That's gift. That's love. Then there's the other side, huh? There is the logic of equivalency. You know the logic of equivalency, huh? That's the eye for an eye logic, huh? Take an eye, lose an eye. That's the world of commercialism, huh? The commercial world. Huh? That's the world of, tit for tat. The world of justice. It's the world of justice. It's the world of bargain and exchange. Where two parties get together and each of them with the mind like a computer trying to figure it out. I will give you this if you will give me this. No, I'll give you this and I'll give you. And finally they come and they both think that they've gotten the better of the deal. It's the logic of the penal system, huh? The punishment must meet the crime. Equivalency. We're geniuses at it. The whole mind is nurtured from childhood on forward in terms of the balance. I am do this, you are do that, I am do this. Watch us when we walk through a store. You look at the bargains, and this is cheap, and this is expensive, and equivalency. We're going. There's no equivalency in love. Put equivalency in love, and it's life in a brothel. That's all. Life in a brothel. Muslims, over and over in the prayer. Over and 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 them, Kareem Allah. God is generous. God is generous. Christ came to give us life. God gives the superabundance of life. For nothing, it's gift. Existence is either accident or it's gift, total and complete. The question becomes that if we see God as a God who's demanding his pound of flesh, morally, spiritually, intellectually, or whatever, then that is the image that we have of God, and that is the image that we will have of ourselves. God will be a God of equivalency, sitting up there with the scales of justice. Scales of justice. Measuring out how much we did versus how much we didn't do. And then maybe a touch of mercy, and that's it. Kind of like a judge that commutes a sentence from 10 years to 6. A higher place, not down so deep in the fires of hell. No. The logic of generosity and the logic of equivalency are two separate faith stances. The person who's dealing in the logic of equivalency is day in and day out, moment in and moment out, going about his or her existence balancing the books. The person who's going about the logic of love is going about a logic of generosity. I don't care about the books because I don't have to care about the books. God loves me, God loves everyone. I'll just go about doing my work. They're different. I give you this if you give me this. That's life in a brothel. I give you this because you need it. Fine. You want this, take it. Fine. Someone steals money from you. Fine. Is money going to keep you in existence? No. Different. It's a different approach. Love is gift. Love is gift. The greater the love, the more intense the gift. It is only gift freely given. It is not the world of the balance back and forth. Crime meets punishment. This good is worth this service. This is worth so much money. This is exchange, tit for tat. It's gift. God is the giver of life. God is merciful. God is gift. If it has gotten turned around from that proclamation, it has gotten turned around because of the tie-in between the church and the state. The state is all equivalency at best. At best it's equivalency. Usually what the state and its sub-institutions are about is getting more than it gives. And therefore the theodicy, a God to justify that approach to existence. A God who superabundantly gives and gives life and gives all that's necessary for life. Who superabundantly cares and is merciful now and always and forever and ever, to live in the image and likeness of that God, you could not be a king, a dictator, an entrepreneur, making your way in the world on the backs of others. What kind of foolishness is it that's at the root of the thought that if everyone just proceeds and follows their own hard self-interest, the world will be a good place? Nonsense. Christian teaching, Christ's teaching is, if you want to have a good time, give something away. These require two different religious and ethical imaginations, two different sets of icons. I know, you know, that the icon of Christ for 1700 years has been interpreted in terms of this: equivalency. Equivalency. Prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. How many of us learned those as the cardinal virtues, huh? The cardinal virtues from the Baltimore Catechism: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Cardinal indeed they are, but you know where they came from? And they were called cardinal virtues. You know where they came from? 500 years before Christ, the Stoics listed them as cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. They're equivalency virtues, huh? Equivalency. They have nothing to do with the superabundance of God's love and generosity, His total and everlasting and unconditional mercy and love. Nothing to do with that. It's different. Where's the possibility of freedom in this? Where's the possibility of taking risk, living life? Everything is measured down to the last instant, and we go on and on with it. From the moment we get up to the moment we go to sleep. And a whole spiritual world builds around it, huh? A whole spiritual world builds around it. Right? How much of a spiritual world? How many of you have heard and dealt in over all kinds of generations of Christian spirituality, to know that the bed that you go to sleep in at night can be your coffin? There's beautiful spirituality for it. Huh? Beautiful. You know what that's about? That's about you better square the books before you go to sleep. Whatever it takes to square them, you better square them, huh? Coffin, oh, negative, negative. Not that this evening you may be born to eternal bliss, huh? It's different. Different. It all is different. If God is a God of justice, you and I and everyone else is in terrible, terrible trouble. I know of no prayer in the Christian church that anyone says in public liturgy or in private prayer where anyone continually says, "Lord, have justice on me." Those who demand justice even in this world, huh, are those who think that the injustices that they have been guilty of can never be seen and found out. That's all. For there is no one that walks that hasn't been terribly unjust. There are 37 million laws in the United States, and everyone here has broken thousands of them. But that is the world of law, isn't it? You can never make enough. There's always another situation to be covered to balance it out a little more. Lord, have justice is not the prayer of the Christian. It's Lord, have mercy. If that's what we want from God, then why isn't it why is not that what we wish to give to others? God says to us, first in Hosea in the Old Testament, in the Psalms, and then in the words of Jesus himself, quoting, God says to us explicitly what we say to him, right? He says, I want mercy, not cult. I want mercy, not sacrifice. He tells us the reality. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And what do we do with it? We bring it over here to equivalency. We say, yeah, if we're merciful, then God will be merciful to us. That's our way of making a deal, huh? Lost the whole thing. The reality is that God is mercy. To participate in the reality of mercy is to know God, and to know God is merciful. And that is mercy. It's not an equivalency thing in the Beatitude. But that's how it gets interpreted. A few works of mercy will save you, you know. Just get the call on at the end of your life. And so, you see, when we talk about nonviolent and nonviolent love, what we're talking about is not, of course, civil disobedience exclusively. Not, of course, absence of war or being against war. For the truth of the matter is, as far as I can see, that most people who wish to pursue nonviolence in terms of war simply haven't investigated the issue with any kind of spiritual soundness or sanity. For unless it is lifestyle and mind style, then all it's going to take is some local politician manipulating the world like Pearl Harbor was manipulated, and there goes the peace movement. Just raise the level of terror a little bit. Nonviolence is lifestyle and mind style, or it doesn't exist. It is participation in the life of God, or it isn't. And so, what the human soul longs for is to grasp what's hidden behind the appearances. What the human soul longs for is to ferret out the mystery that brings it into existence. What the human soul longs for is to experience, what Wittgenstein talked about when he said the great issue for the human being is not what the universe is, but that the universe is. That's the great issue. What the human soul longs for is to discover that if behind the visible facade there is an invisible presence, enduring and perduring, what the human soul has to know is that it is ultimately secure forever and free from threat from the visible and the invisible world. that it is rooted in a power, it is rooted in a love that will be its fortress, its refuge, its strength, and its rock forever in the face of unknown, visible, and invisible worlds. Christ comes to tell us that indeed, that is so. We are secure forever. And now go and live in the image of me. Love as I have loved. I am the icon through which you should see the world, through which you should see God, through which you should see others. No other images are real. The others are illusionary. The God who is not manifest in me doesn't exist. The image of humanity that doesn't come through me is illusionary. Loving as other than I love is not love that is consonant with the fundamental reality in the universe, God who is love. So, very, very seriously, as we sit and we listen and we reflect, as our life passes from spring to summer to autumn to winter, the question becomes, what kind of God and what kind of life is worthy of the human heart? Blessed be God at all times, now and always and forever and ever. Praise be to God. If God is a tyrant, if God is a monster, if God is a God of fear and equivalency, then those words are words of fear. Simply trying to get on the good side of irrational power that can destroy you. Blessed be God. Praise God. The only God that can truly be blessed and praised is a God that loves you, a God that loves me, a God that loves all that He has brought out of nothingness and loves them unconditionally and forever. That God indeed can be praised and blessed. The God that loves the Americans and hates the Russians, God can't be blessed or praised. And that's not what Jesus taught. The forgiveness of 7 times 70 that is asked of us because that's what God does, and we are made in God's image and likeness. God's mercy is superabundant, and to live the life of God is to live in superabundant mercy towards others, not in equivalency. And so, to conclude, when Romans 8 says that nothing can separate us from the love of God, nothing visible or invisible, that nothing can separate us from the love of God made visible in an image in Jesus Christ, it's talking about something for which there is a logical network of implications about how to live, internally and externally. So, very, very simply, the question becomes, is God a God of love? Is God a God of everlasting mercy? Can anything separate us from the love of God? Is Romans 8 true or false? For, as far as I can see, if that is not the nature of God, if that is not the kind of God God is, then nonviolence is impossible. It has no place. Because we have to be on our guard at some level. But if that is the God that God is, so much of what's going on in the church for the last 1700 years is not a true icon. Is not a true image of Christ and of the God that Christ reveals. If love is not the root of our being, says Gandhi, nonviolence is impossible. If God is not the root of our being, and if that God is not the God who is love, agape, nonviolence is impossible. It is psychologically, spiritually, logically, theologically, it is impossible. Impossible. If God is not Father, if God is not Mother. And therefore, perhaps a way of concluding is by a little quote from Ortega y Gasset. He says, "Take stock of those around you, and you will hear them talk in precise terms about themselves and about their surroundings. And it would seem to point to them having some valid ideas about what reality is all about. But if you start to examine the ideas about God and man and women, of which they speak, you will find that these ideas hardly in any way reflect reality. You will find that most ideas that most people have do not even attempt to adjust themselves to the reality at hand. Quite the contrary. Most people use their minds and the images of their minds to cut off any personal vision of the real. Even any personal vision of one's own life. The individual suspects and is frightened by the possibility that life may be chaos. And this feeling in the depths of his or her soul forces him or her to either face reality in the raw or to try to avoid it. Hence, most people try to cover over the possible chaotic dimensions of reality. They refuse to see reality by trying to pull a curtain of logic, theological logic, philosophical logic, over reality. They generate a personal fantasy about what is real, and they subdue the chaos with that. The human being uses his, her mind, ideas, for the most part, not to pursue truth, which is the conformity of mind to reality. The human mind, for the most part, is used as a trench for defense of personal, fanciful understandings of existence. Every human being has a philosophical theory, and for the most part, these elaborate philosophical theories are scarecrows to frighten away reality, whose ambiguity, uncertainty, simply cannot be endured. And yet, every soul knows that his or her theory of reality is dwarfed by reality. Christ tells us nothing about the nature of the galaxy, the nature of the atom. All Christ tells us is God loves us now and always and forever and ever, that you can trust your Creator, for the Creator is good and loves humankind.